Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. So this week I'm doing the vlog on the sensitivity labels. Why sensitivity label matters now for the organization. It's not mattering now exactly, but how does it matter every time for the organization? So since the AI era has come up, a lot of data being exposed, being organization data or a public data. So handling the data appropriately prevents the organization from having the penalized or any legal consequences. Yeah. So sensitivity labels is not new, of course, but yeah, I just wanted to cover the basics of what you have today, and then how you can leverage for the co-pilot exclusion in for any sensitive data you think that should be excluded with the help of the sensitivity labels. Along with that, we'll also see how the monitoring pieces also makes more sense here when sensitive data is leaving the organization, or if any oversharing permission data like a SharePoint site or a OneDrive file is having oversharing permission, how these sensitive labels will come into picture to protect your sensitive data. So we'll see that quick demo as well of how this data get prevented when somebody tries to share the data outside the organization with the sensitive label confidential or critical sensitive information, for instance. So moving to the next slide, let me pick it up. So why it is important of importance of sensitive labels for the organization. Of course, enhancing the data protection for the organization and staying compliant here. So end users, they work a lot of M365, they work on a lot of M365 documents, but mindfully, very few applies the actual label, and only few understands okay what sort of data I'm sending to the what sort of people. Could be an vendor, could be a third party, or could be even internally a sensitive data is flowing around with inappropriate team, for instance. So user might not be completely aware of what sort of data they are sending, but we as an admin can definitely control with auto labeling their content based on the sensitive information that is containing. So how the auto labeling helps or prevent the sensitive information being shared wider organizations, or even sensitive information is shared outside the organization. Apart from sensitive informations, we'll also see about how you can encrypt your data so that only authorized people are having access to it. Let's say, for example, there's HR critical data, and that HR by fault, by default, by forgot or unknowingly, let's say HR unknowingly has sent the data to certain user, right? Who is not an intended recipient. So this encryption helps to control the data, and even the with the monitoring in monitoring from the purview, your insider or your security team basically identify that particular file and delete it. This way, you can even prevent the data in case if your data is landed with the wrong people with inappropriate access. So we'll see that as well, how encryption can be prevented. And then, sorry, encryption can be used here. And also, we also see how you can restrict the forwarding. For instance, I just want to send the data to the specific person, and he shouldn't be able to forward the data to the next person, right? He is an intended recipient to me, but I don't want the person to basically forward it to anyone else. And there's a lot of things you need to manage as well when it comes to the sensitivity labels rollout. So there's a lot of things we need to do exercise. I'll just have a quick points about what you need to be prepared of before you rolling out this to everyone. So you need to overview, you need to basically understand what all your teams have to come into picture to roll this out for everyone. For instance, the data team or the data officer teams need to be heavily involved here. If you have got the privacy separate team or the risk and compliance team who actually holds the definition of each labels, right? So you need to involve everyone here. So it's not just not for classifying your data, it's also for handling your data appropriately, right? So you need to know how you need to handle the critical sensitive information. For instance, do you want to have an encryption in place, or do you want to have an intended recipient, or for example you wanted to exclude this documents from the copilot search. So these kind of definition of that particular label needs to be decided before you initiate any sort of work. And trust me, this is not happen same day, but gradually the roadmap. For example, let's say for example the organization is from 1,000 to 5,000 users, then probably I would say around 6 months. That includes everything from initiating the pilot, and then phases, and then finally with the end users and adoptions, you reaching out your milestone of completely rolling this out. So before I move to this importance of sensitivity labels in organization, I'll just recollect of how this integration with the or the collaboration with various teams is very important at the planning stage itself. If you are rolling out the labels, ensure that you involve every team that needs to be involved. If not, what's going to happen? Let's say the policy definition which you have provided for the internal, for example, or the proprietary data or a proprietary label if you're going to use it, and you as an admin cannot decide it, right? So you need a right team or the right person to authorize and let you know. They let you know the admins, for example, because we are just enabler, and I know architecture teams, right? Architectural team just do the enablement based on the requirement of the planning which comes from the top management. So involve the right team. Let they own the authorization of giving you the definition of the labels. Let they own the authorization of the priority of each labels. So create a checklist, right? As you see in my screen, create a checklist of each and every teams, that is a RACI, for example, who is responsible, accountable, right? And you need to keep them informative. So just involve each and every team so that the planning becomes so crucial here, and you're not ending up, or you're not ending up with a blocker for this roadmap in between. So once you have all this data in place, right, what is the data matrix, or what is the sensitivity labels definition should look like, or the names of the sensitivity labels, each sensitivity labels, how it should be handled. For example, internal, all right. So what is the data definition for that? No encryption, definitely. All right. So what can this data can go outside the organization? Yes or no? So have your checklist ready so that when you involve the rest of the team, they understand the not the technology, at least the way this works. Remember, sensitive labels is not just for classifying your data. That is just the base. It is beyond that. How you control the data is more important here. So with that checklist, as you see in my screen, I'm moving on to the next slide now. So importance of sensitivity labels in organizations. So first is data classification and also how the team is handling the data. Security controls enforcement, as I said, always this is always important for each label. Regulatory compliance support. So this is where one more team probably coming and telling you that, okay, CSI, I own this. Confidential, I own this. This particular label anybody is using, this data shouldn't be going outside the organization. This should be encrypted. This should not be even allowed to print, for instance, right? So all this data collection is very important. That's the regulatory compliance support. And it's not just GDPR or HIPPA, it could be even the for example, you are working for a research organization, they have their own keyword matrix. So ensure those keywords are used for your sensitive info types to apply this label as an auto labeling, for example, automatically labeling your document or an email which is being sent with a specific label. Enhanced collaboration and accountability. You see here is an accountability. What does it mean? I am an engineer, a normal engineer who is handling a lot of data in terms of creating a documents, sending across the team, verifying it, architectural diagrams, sending across the team. All right, done. Now, when you're doing an RFP with a public, I know the third party vendor, and you found that the architectural diagram has come up as a confidential automatically because of the audit requirement which I done in my sensitive info types. And since this is CSI now, I'm not able to send this data to the outside the organization. What comes to my mind? Downgrade the label to public. Now, all right, I did my public and I send my data. What happens on the back end? So your data get recorded because you gave the justification to downgrade your label that you are sending this data outside your organization. So you are accountable. So where is that sitting? So that is actually sitting in the purview audit logs. If I'm injecting this data to my Splunk or a Sentinel, for instance, that get triggers an alert saying that, okay, this guy has downgraded the label for sending an email outside the organization. Well, that's it, right? Then the security then reviews it, and if see there's a risk, then he's accountable. If there's no risk, this is actual genuine cases. So this is how I'll leave it to the security team to handle these things, right? Why should I think so much? But we as an admin ensure that we plan it, or we as an architect team plan it accordingly with collaborative from the various teams. So having the proper data label matrix. So when I say data label matrix, what is the order of each label? What is the name of each label? What is the definition of each label? So that's how it is, right? So you can see on the my screen, I have in my organization, in my test tenant, I have got public, internal, confidential, and highly confidential. So anybody is using a public, I will put a mail tip that showing for the user this kind of public label can be used for the data that is unconfidential and can be shared with anyone, or non-sensitive information, for example. And I apply no control or no protection. This is what I received from my data office, let's say. And if it's internal, so we give a typical use case as a mail tip for the user. Oh, sorry, it's not a mail tip, it's a label tip. So internal only communication, and I'll apply the basic access restriction. For example, this data should be circulated inside the organization, and if it's going outside, I will still ask for the justification. Since this is internal to the public, I'll keep the record as a low in my risk parameter. And then when it comes to the confidential, so again, the definition should come from the higher authority. So they define here as a client data or any financial document that contains. So this is just one typical example which I'm giving. So for other organizations like a research, pharma, healthcare, it will be different. So I'm just picked this from the net. Of course, I just have the basic information of this confidential. Highly confidential, trade secrets, legal documents, so anything that you think this data should be handled very critically, then that will be as high confidential. And we ensure that the strict encryption is required and the no external sharing, strictly forward, strictly blocking the external forward. Taxonomy and data protection. So taxonomy is a very important topic here. So this is the where your data office team or your legal and compliance team will come into picture of to let us know that, okay, so these sort of data can be categorized as a legal, financial, medical, and these data should be as a high confidential, and how it needs to be protected. So make sure your all your stakeholders are involved in the planning stage itself. And I press this all the time, involve them. So once you have the sensitivity labels, on the back end you need something called as policies. You apply the controls and also auto labeling. Auto labeling and mandatory labeling are two different concepts, and there's a client side labeling and a server side labeling. Which takes the precedence? Client side labeling, me working on an Outlook or a document, if I apply the label, so that's a client side. Does it override the server side labeling, that which is auto labeling? Answer is yes. So my server, basically it detects the sensitive info type and then applies the label. And since I'm working, I thought, okay, this is not true. This is not a sensitive information. This is genuinely, it's a, let's say, internal use purpose. I'll downgrade my label with a justification stating that this sensitive info type is internal, or a proprietary, for instance. So that takes the precedence, right? So manual labeling always takes the precedence over an auto labeling. So once you have a clear definition, enforcement, policies and controls, you have your checklist completed. Now the first step is have the pilot group. Make sure this pilot group is picked up from each and every department, so you avoid when you start your roadmap or a phase rollout, for instance. Remember, this magic or rollout of this label will not happen on the same day. It will pick up, as I said, for the organization up to 5,000 users, it can span up to 6 months. And the first 1 month itself could be a planning, right? And then the pilot for a couple of weeks or a month. And then you, let's say, for example, you wanted to phase it out as a department wise or the region wise with involving the right stakeholders. So that's how you complete this, uh, the journey of sensitivity labels. So this is what I was telling about the auto labeling concept. So you have various way you can auto label your document or a content. So one is based on the sensitive info type, which are, there are some predefined sensitive information types which we can choose it, like a credit card number, policy numbers, uh, passport numbers, for instance, right? Or HIPAA, like medical reference numbers. So these sensitive info types you can use it. Or if there's any trainable classifiers. So when I say trainable classifiers, like a contracts, right, or a legal contracts, for instance, or any sort of document like a medical document. So these all are will be called as a trainable classifiers because they train on the medical data, or uh, you know, yeah, they're like a predefined format of those documents. And then should I go with the default label instead, so that the end user doesn't miss to apply the label? Choices from the your organization, how you want to fit it. If you see that the in a pilot, when you're doing, there's a lot of people not at all applying the labels, and you found, let's say you have done the set of 100 users pilot, and you found that hardly the usage is going, the spike is very low, or after the week you saw that the constantly coming down. Giving the default label, you could see that the at least the utilization has gone high. And is people mindfully applying the labels? Then comes a question of how you train your users, which is very important for this journey of if you're rolling out these sensitivity labels for the organization. End user engagement and adoption, or an ACM if you want to call it, as adoption change management, is critical for the organization from the pilot itself. And there'll be a lot of you know you'll be breaking the system here. For instance, when you're doing the pilot, you could have found that this email is not going, that printing is not happening, right? I'm not able to open the document, I'm not able to share the document. When I share my screen on my presentation or the teams meeting, the participants say that is they get blank screen. So all these things are for the learning, right? And then that's where the stakeholders will come into picture to support you, to tell them that okay, this is highly confidential, that is why it is going at the blank screen, right? And what they need to do, right? All this process needs to be agreed and signed off by the stakeholders, so that they continuously involve them during the pilot phase, so that the blockers are avoided in the in a continuation of this journey. Very important. How the sensitive label can help you reduce the risk of AI usage. I think I spoke too much. Let's start with the quick demo, and then let me also see if I can create a sensitivity label for excluding this AI. Yeah, see, when I say AI, it can exclude only the Copilot at the moment. There is no additional connectors available today on the DLP or Purview side, even though the DSPM is still in the Purview stage. So you'll find that the current capabilities for the exclusion from the Copilot itself. All right, so I have the screen of Purview portal. Uh, if people not sure, if anybody not sure about the Purview portal, how do you come to the sensitive label screen? So just go to purview.microsoft.com. This will bring the default front page. So once you have, so this is my test tenant. So apologize if you see that sensitivity score or the risk score is beyond what you have seen. So once you're in the default screen, so you can click on the information protection and go to the sensitivity labels. Well, so there are two bits which you need to be careful of. So one is sensitivity label and the second one is policies. So this is the labels which I have currently. There are some policies. The labels been tied up to the different policies. So, and each policies can be applied to the any number of users, right? And what happens if the user is part of multiple policies, right? So we'll see that. I'll just go through that as well. So I have in my organization these labels defined here, but I'm not applying this for everyone, right? I have a set of department wants certain labels, or if you want to keep it for everyone the same kind of labels, then you can have just few set of labels here, and you can definitely go with the testing. So you can also keep the testing labels as well, and make sure the priority is important, because this is what the end user will see when they apply the labels in their screen on the uh, Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, even Outlook. So each label, let's start creating a label, and then I'll walk through the journey of what all the controls it can have. So I'll go for the Copilot, exclude. So this is the name for the admin, so the end user will not see this one. So let's say you want to give a friendly name for the end user to understand, okay, this label I can apply for restricting the Copilot search on this particular document. So I'll call it as restrict Copilot itself, as it's my test tenant. I don't mind of keeping anything, but yeah, so restrict Copilot. I don't want to give it highest for now, so just keep it as the lowest. Oh, well, initial while creating it will be high. You can go to that, the previous screen, and you can bring it to the lower. Use this label to restrict Copilot search for your content. Well, let me choose Marigold. Well, once you have the label defined, definition is given there. Here is the containers where you want to apply it. So the first one is you want to apply for the files and other data assets. So files is when you want OneDrive and the SharePoint files. It's not at the SharePoint site level, but the documents repositories inside. So label files, and then you have in emails if you want to do the meetings, and you also wanted to make sure this label appears in the groups and sites as well. So if you're doing for the first time, you might be unable to select this option because it will be grayed out. You need to run certain commands on the SharePoint admin center to enable this option. So that you see on my screen. So once you have the the content about where it needs to be this label needs to be applied. So next step is to take a control of whether you want to control this any document, the labeled document, or you just wanted to apply a basic content marking, could be a header, footer, or even the watermarks. So let's say I just wanted to apply and also want to control the access, for example, encryption and stuff. So we can view that as well. I'll just quickly select this, and again when I click next, you can see that the permission, what you have to define this now itself. Let's say for example, since I use a Copilot exclude, this will be only the, let's say, few set of users you are rolling this out, right? So we want to assign permissions now, and then use access content experts. This is where I said that, let's say for example, this document has reached to somebody who is not supposed to receive that document. So then you can create a user access to content expire on a specific date or a number of days when the label is applied. Let's say 1 day. So that will instantly delete it when the system will be online. So that particular document will be entirely deleted from the end user. If he's an external, then the document gets unopened. It will be fully encrypted. The user will lose the access on the document, and you'll not be able to open up it, even though he's authorizing, like trying to authenticate to that document as well. Should you want to allow offline access? This is where, as I said, no. If you wanted to make sure that document want to be content as not to be, deleted from specific days, ensure that allow offline access is also not allowed. Once you have that, assign permission. So you wanted to assign permission to a specific group or any organizations, everyone can use this. So I can just add my all the organization group here. You can quickly see here, assign permission to specific people, so only they can interact with the content that this label is applied. So I'm just using the Copilot one. So as I said, the Copilot group was there. So I can, if that particular users, you wanted to restrict, or if your Copilot is already rolled out for the every, the entire users across the organization, then I would recommend use the entire people, so that the let everyone choose the permission accordingly. Or any watermarking, you can use it. So keep in mind, I said I am going to restrict this, anybody applying this label, I just wanted to restrict the Copilot search, right? So I'm not going to do much from here, content marking and stuff. I'll just go back, and then this is your auto labeling. So in case should you wanted to apply this label, if there's any specific content, right, you can give the condition. If this email is going outside the organization, or if this document, so you have the various conditions here. So you can put the content, contains the keywords. You can create a group of keywords as well as, one specific group, and then you can add that entire group over here. Okay, we call them as a document repo, repo of the keywords. So you can basically create that group with all the keywords list, and then you can edit that if you want here. That is where I would say that, your taxonomy will come into picture, where they have the set of keywords that needs to be prevented. Well, this helps you out, that clarify that auto labeling bit. Well, with that, nothing. You'll just have to see the permissions, and then you have to validate. Since I did not select the content marking, that's where I'm not able to go for the next. But yeah, my agenda, or my objective is to just restrict the Copilot whoever applies this label. So I don't need to apply any controls for that here. I don't want to apply any content marking. I just have to create the label first, a default normal label, which is visible for everyone. No auto labeling is required. In case if you wanted to restrict definitely for any specific information. I don't want to select anything here. I don't want to use external user access like a guest accounts. Do you wanted to grant anything? External sharing and control. Do you want to disable the external sharing for anybody selecting this? So you can go for this one, where you can disable. For example, normally when the people try to share this document on the SharePoint site or a OneDrive, they get a everyone group, right? So if you select this option, they'll not get that everyone group. Yep, I'll just create the label now. Is now created. So once label is created, you see that the option there, publish the labels to user groups. I don't want to do the publish now, so I'll just say later, and I'll do the done. So now my label comes at the top or the bottom based on the priority. So since you see that the highest priority it has choose, so that's why it has come down. So that's a ranking. So 0 stands for the highest priority. I want that to be down, of course, and then I'll go to the policies. You can define where this policy should be up. I mean, I can go to the label, for example, I have a pilot policy, let's say, and if the user is part of more than one policy, if the user is part of the more than one policy, then all the policies will apply for the user on the priority. Let's say here you have 4 labels, here you have given 2 additional labels, the user will see the 6 labels. Here you have defined the label to encrypt, here you have defined the user not to encrypt. Encrypt will take the priority because that's the highest priority. So if the user is part of more than one policy, now you got to know that he'll be getting all the policy controls that is applied over here from each of these policy. So I'll edit this pilot policy, and then I have to tag my labels. So that's published label. So I will edit this policy now. So I've got internal, confidential, so many. It's just a pilot. So I'll just select the one which we created, restrict Copilot. I'll add to the list. Next. I don't want any admin units to control here. I want to see it's currently applied for one user. You can basically edit it. So I've just applied to this specific user. Okay. I want to apply for the all users. Yes, this is my test tenant. Well, this is what I was talking about. Do you want a justification if they downgrade it 100%, right? So you can just, you have to select this option without forget. Require user to apply a label to their emails and document. So this is when the user is drafting a document and then they are saving it. Then it will ask for the user to recommends for label. Same for the email. Now, since it is conjunction of both, how do you separate it? I don't want the user to apply for documents. I want only user to apply for the email. How do I do that? Well, there's a PowerShell script which is coming on your screen. You can now run that command to this specific label, sorry, label policy, and that will actually takes out or removes uh, the scope of the documents or a scope of the email which you are preferring. Fabric, same thing. So do you want all the dashboards before they publish, do you want to apply the label mandated? Checkbox. So this is very important. Let's say you have a website where or your intra site where you have a policy definitions where end user can understand, okay, this sort of data is confidential, this is CSI. You can put and how to handle the data, right? So if you have got the customer the custom page, you can probably put that public URL, or even the intranet URL is fine because all these users will be authenticated to that URL anyways. So for now, I'm not checkbox that because I'm a test tenant. I don't have anything that is customly created link. So do you want a default label? I choose the internal, and you can select anything with what you have published, which you have tagged in your policy now. And so you can see the order here, right? So make sure you give the proper order there. Like first is public and then internal, confidential. So choose it accordingly. So require users to apply label to their email. So since I selected the option there, so it's asking me again. So I just uncheck it. Then the user can send email without the label. Checkbox, user will have to apply the label mandatory. So this is another one important. Let's say your email which you are drafting could be a non-sensitive information, but the document which you are attaching to the email contains the confidential label. Now what happens? This inherits, Outlook will inherit the label from your document, and then it'll give a mail tip stating for the user policy tip saying that, okay, this label has been uh, applied as a confidential because of the label, the policy tip, because of the confidential being a precedence. So the user will get the policy tip stating that your label has been upgraded or downgraded. No, your label has been updated to the confidential because of the attachment. So you have two types. Recommend the users to apply it. Either how do you want to choose the user? Like for example, you just recommend them to saying that, okay, you have a confidential file attached and apply this suitable label, or you automatically apply that. So that is automatically apply the label. So you have two options. Either you recommend it or you apply it automatically. So now for now, let's say I'll choose automatically apply. Default label for your meetings and calendar events. I'm not selecting anything because I don't want to meetings to be applied with any labels. And if there's any shared meetings, for example, okay, I don't think I need to cover this. Let me move on to the next. Sites and groups, I'm not selecting, but if you have any critical sites and you want to make sure that, okay, at least you want to have the labels configured for the sites, then you can choose any. I'm moving on to the next fabrics now. I'll just complete this. So now the policy is applied for everyone, right? And the replication usually takes the organization of scale of 5,000 users. It can take up to 4 to 5 hours. That's what I have seen when I was doing the pilot in most of the times in my test lab, of course. Right, so now we have the labels, we have the policies that contains all the label. Now my objective is to exclude the content that it contains the restrict copilot label. So for that, I'll go to the DLP, data loss prevention. So once you have the DLP, so there will be one policy which by default created, but you can create one more policy if you want. I'm just going to the default one. I actually set it into in a simulation, but you can initially it will be off in your tenant, so you can turn that on. If this is not available, then you can just go and create a new label. Let me edit the policy. All right. So once you have the label created, now you can see the option there, Microsoft 365 Copilot and Copilot Chat, right? So that's what I'm selecting, and you can see that if I unselect, I get all these options. So since my objective is only for the Copilot, I just select that one, and then the DLP policy. So it has got all this, the numbers, the security numbers, SSN, etc. So all those things it takes as a DLP sensitive information types, or the trainable classifiers, for instance, right? So, and you can tag up, you can put your classifiers, which is sensitive info types, as one group, as I told you, and then that also can be injected here. And now I just have to go ahead and create a rule. So I'll say that if the content contains sensitive information types and sensitivity labels. So my objective is to anything that contains the restrict for Copilot. So here we go. We have got the our restrict Copilot sensitive label, which is created to exclude the Copilot. Our objective is to exclude the Copilot search or the Copilot indexing. So whoever applies this label. So here you see the option. So once you select it, you then go to the condition. Once condition is completed, then you go to the action. So under the action, you'll be selecting the restrict the Copilot from processing content. So that's the default option which is available with, if you select this default policy. And then I'm going to say that accessing this knowledge source should be blocked. So once that is done, you have option to either you want to send an alert to the admins when the rule is matched, or you can simply save it and then publish this rule so that the impact is immediate, and then you'll see that the rule is impacted the end users. So this is pretty much important, right? Because let's say I have a lot of documents in my OneDrive, and there are some certain sensitive info types. I don't want Copilot to ground all this data into the search or processing. So with this label, I can exclude the specific documents out of my containers or repositories, so that the processing of the sensitive information type, I don't want the Copilot to look into. And this is pretty much important as well, because you never know, the Copilot architecture might not change in terms of processing, but if they have introduced the new LLM, for instance, right, then you wanted to exclude this Copilot search, at least for the time being, unless that is something is fixed. Then yes, this is the right option you can use to basically exclude the Copilot indexing at the moment, at least. Well, so that's the more about the demo. So once you have this AI exclusion, I mean, I've just walked through. So this is the same process which you follow for the labels in terms of rolling out. Deployment is done. The next critical bit is the monitoring, which is a key piece, because you never know what sort of data is going outside the organization. You don't know what sort of data is still sitting as a working on the data of the real time, but what about the data at rest, right? So the monitoring will help you to, and the simulations will help you to understand what sort of data is at the rest. And then you can apply the auto label based on the content, or you can run the simulations with the key specific words and stuff like that, and then you can take a decision of what needs to be done. So monitoring is a very good piece of work if you have the full deployment or the full furnished or a full-fledged development you have done, sorry, a full-fledged rollout. Then the monitoring is the key bit of everything. So the purview will give you a very clear picture about which DLP policies has been applied, what is triggered the sensitivity label, is there any justification being granted provided for lowering the labels. So which is accountability for the end user, right? So this, and if any sensitive information type is say shared outside the organization, you get alerted. So this monitoring is very pretty much critical, and having this into the Sentinel or even the Splunk, triggering the alert in the real time keeps the organization safe. So hence, ensure that your strategy is very well defined in the beginning stage itself. Culture of responsibility, which I like most in this slide actually. So if your end users are pretty well trained, then your organization is 100% safe, right? Because who is protecting the organization? It would be as a front end, right? It will always be the admins or your network perimeters, everything. But when it comes to the core bit of your organization, who is protecting the organization is everyone. It's the end users, right? So if they are very well trained about how to use the content of each document, right? Being a sensitive information, if this is pretty well defined for them, a proper end user training makes them pretty much comfortable day to day how to handle the each data, how to classify the data, and what happens if I move this data, for example confidential data, to somebody. So they will start following the procedure of confidential data, how I need to be transferred it to being a third party, being internal users, or being the vice versa departments as well. So this responsibility or this knowledge for the end users training is a core piece of this journey. So with that, perfect. So with that, so we are completed. Hope my vlog makes at least few people adds a value to them, at least a few likes, few suggestions. If anything, I'm happy to welcome those. And for collaboration, please start for collaborations, please email me to my email ID, which I've shared in the description, or please follow me on the LinkedIn. It's good to say hi for the stranger and then become friends. Cheers, take care.